There is a specific kind of frustration that comes from being the new guy in an established, hostile environment. You walk through the doors ready to work, eager to learn, and instantly hit a wall of unearned arrogance from people who peaked at their current pay grade. They freeze you out, they mock you. They go out of their way to make you feel microscopic. But the beautiful thing about workplace bullies is that their cruelty is almost always a mask for their own incompetence. When you finally decide to strike back, you don't need to raise your voice, throw a punch, or even break a rule. You just have to be undeniably, ruthlessly better than them. Let me tell you about the time a little bit of sweat and a lot of spite completely dismantled the egos of the worst guys on my shift. The air inside the Apex Catering logistics facility always tasted faintly of industrial bleach and stale steam. It was a massive, cavernous warehouse filled with stainless steel machinery, endless conveyor belts, and the deafening clatter of thousands of ceramic plates, bowls, and silverware sets being processed after massive corporate events. I had just been hired as a floor technician. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. Unfortunately, the real toll of the job wasn't physical, it was social. From the very first hour of my first week, two veterans on the floor decided I was their designated punching bag. Their names were Harjap and Taranveer. They had been working the line for 3 years, a tenure that, in their minds, elevated them to royalty. Whenever I asked a legitimate training-related question, they would simply look at me, exchange a smirk, and turn their backs. They refused to learn my name, exclusively referring to me as white boy with a distinct dripping condescension. The worst part was the blatant hypocrisy. The production floor had a strict English-only policy. This wasn't about suppressing culture. It was a basic safety and operational protocol in a warehouse full of heavy machinery, moving parts, and deafening noise. Everyone needed to understand everyone else instantly. Harjap and Taranveer ignored this entirely. They would stand 3 feet away from me, lean on their workstations, and speak rapidly in Punjabi. I didn't need to be a linguist to know they were trashing me. The pointed glances, the cruel laughter, the mocking gestures, it was all universally understood. I asked them politely to speak English when they were talking about me right in front of my face. I told them I found it incredibly disrespectful. Taranveer just rolled his eyes, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. So a few days later, I decided to test their boundaries. My grandmother was from Montreal, and I had grown up speaking a very fast, very aggressive dialect of Quebecois French. When Harjap and Taranveer started their usual routine, standing right beside me and laughing in Punjabi, I turned to the only other guy at the station and launched into a loud, animated monologue in heavy French, gesturing vaguely toward the two of them. I smiled, laughed, and shook my head just like they did. The reaction was instantaneous. Harjap's face flushed a deep, angry red. He stormed off the floor and went straight to our team lead, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Marisol. Within 10 minutes, Marisol was pulling me aside, asking why Harjap was complaining that I was creating a hostile work environment by speaking a language they couldn't understand. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the complaint left me speechless for a moment. I explained the situation to Marisol, pointing out their daily violations of the language rule. She sighed, rubbing her temples, fully aware of the toxic dynamic, but hesitant to rock the boat with 2 of her senior loaders. She told me to just keep my head down and do the work. I decided right then and there that keeping my head down wasn't going to cut it. I was going to make them bleed, professionally speaking, of course. My opportunity arrived the following Tuesday. Marisol was rotating stations to prevent repetitive strain injuries. She assigned me to the loading end of the primary dish conveyor. My partner for the day was Oksana, a fiercely friendly Ukrainian girl who had been nothing but kind to me since day one. Our job was to take the dirty, stacked catering dishes from the incoming carts and slot them perfectly onto the moving pegs of the conveyor belt, which fed directly into the massive, tunnel-like industrial washer. At the other end of that 80-foot metal beast stationed at the offloading catch, Harjap and Taranveer. Their job was to pull the steaming, sanitized dishes off the belt and stack them into transport crates before the plates backed up and triggered the machine's safety sensors, which would halt the entire line. Oksana showed me the rhythm. "You have to be smooth," she explained, demonstrating how to slide a plate from the stack and flick it perfectly between the moving plastic dividers. "Don't fight the belt. Let it take the dish from your hand." For the first 20 minutes I was clumsy. The belt moved continuously, a relentless mechanical crawl, but I am a fast learner and anger is a phenomenal fuel. By the 30-minute mark I found my groove. I wasn't just matching the pace, I was pushing it. I started playing a high BPM electronic track in my head, a relic from my days working in a high-volume kitchen. My hands became a synchronized blur of motion. Grab, slide, click, grab, slide, click. Oksana noticed the shift in my speed and her eyes widened. She began feeding me the stacks faster, clearing the carts with ruthless efficiency. Usually loaders leave a gap of 2 or 3 empty pegs between dishes to give the offloaders time to catch up. I stopped leaving gaps. I packed the belt to maximum density. A solid, unbroken wall of white ceramic moved steadily toward the washing tunnel. I wasn't even breaking a sweat. My breathing was steady, my movements purely economical. It felt like a trance. The industrial clamor of the warehouse faded, replaced by the rhythmic clatter of porcelain hitting plastic. Then, a loud, grinding buzzer echoed across the floor. The conveyor belt jerked to a sudden halt. I stood there, a plate hovering in my hand, looking down the line. I glanced at Oksana, who was biting her lower lip to hide a massive grin. A few minutes later, Marisol came marching down the aisle, her high-visibility vest flapping, a clipboard clutched tightly in her hand. She did not look happy. The line productivity metrics were monitored in real time on a digital dashboard in her office, and our line, usually the highest producing in the building, had just flatlined. "What is going on here?" Marisol demanded, looking at the stationary belt. I gave her my best look of mild, innocent confusion. "I don't know, Marisol, the belt just keeps stopping. I'm trying to load the dishes, but I have no space to put them until the line starts moving again." Marisol frowned, looking at the tightly packed rows of dishes I had already slotted. She turned on her heel and power-walked down the 80-foot length of the machine to the offloading station. I couldn't hear the exact words being exchanged over the ambient roar of the facility, but I didn't need to. Marisol's posture was rigid, her free hand gesturing wildly toward the massive pileup of plates jamming the exit sensors. According to Daljit, another floor worker who happened to be walking by, the scene was pathetic. Harjap and Taranvir had been completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume and speed of the incoming plates. Because they were used to a lazy, relaxed pace, they had gotten complacent. Worse, Marisol caught them both with wireless earbuds hidden beneath their required ear protection, completely distracted by their phones while the plates piled up and triggered the emergency stop. They got a vicious verbal dressing down right there on the floor. For the rest of the 8-hour shift, Marisol practically babysat them. Every time the belt threatened to stop, she was barking orders, forcing them to scramble, sweat, and hustle just to keep up with the relentless, unbroken stream of dishes I was feeding into the machine. I kept the pace at maximum for the entire 8 hours. My arms burned, my shoulders ached, but the pure, unadulterated spite flowing through my veins kept me moving like a piston. I made them work harder in one day than they had in their entire 3-year tenure. When the lunch bell finally rang, I washed up, grabbed my cooler, and sat at a small table in the corner of the break room. I unwrapped a thick, greasy double-patty hamburger, propped my phone against my water bottle, and started watching a comedy video, laughing quietly to myself. A shadow fell over my table. I looked up to see Harjap and Taranvir looming over me. Their blue work shirts were dark with sweat. They looked exhausted, miserable, and furious. "You need to slow down," Harjap demanded, his voice dropping into a harsh, threatening register. "You're jamming the line on purpose." I took a deliberately slow, obnoxious bite of my burger. I chewed, swallowed, and wiped my mouth with a napkin. I looked him dead in the eye. "No," I said, my voice completely flat and devoid of intimidation. "What did you say?" Taranvir snapped, stepping closer. "I said no," I repeated, picking up a French fry. "If you guys had maybe not gone out of your way to make me feel completely unwelcome, I might have considered slowing down to a reasonable pace. But you didn't, so I won't. If you can't keep up with a white boy on his second week, maybe this job is just too fast-paced for you." I turned my eyes back to my phone, hit play on the video, and took another bite of my burger, completely ignoring them. They stood there for another 10 seconds, vibrating with rage, before finally storming off to the other side of the room. They spent the rest of the lunch break glaring at me, mean-mugging me from across the tables. I just kept laughing at my video. It truly sucks to suck. But I wasn't quite finished. Revenge is a dish best served with a side of petty, territorial dominance. The Apex facility was located in an industrial park on the outskirts of the city, and a large portion of the workforce took the same municipal bus back to the transit hub. Over the past 2 weeks, I had noticed that Harjap and Taranvir always sat in the exact same spot on that bus. The elevated, backward-facing double seats right behind the rear exit doors. It was their little throne. When the shift finally ended, I bolted for the locker room. I changed out of my boots, grabbed my backpack, and practically sprinted to the bus stop outside the main gates. I beat the crowd by a solid 3 minutes. When the bus hissed to a stop and the doors opened, I was the first one on. I walked straight to the back, tossed my heavy canvas backpack onto the window seat, and sat myself down on the aisle seat, stretching my legs out comfortably. 5 minutes later, Harjap and Taranveer boarded. They trudged down the aisle, looking utterly drained. As they approached the rear doors, they looked up, fully expecting to claim their usual spot. Instead, they found me, sitting in their seats. Looking out the window, they froze. Taranveer opened his mouth to say something, but the bus lurched forward, forcing him to grab a hanging strap. There were no other double seats left. The two veterans of the floor had to spend the 45-minute ride standing in the crowded aisle, clinging to the poles, swaying with every pothole, while I sat comfortably, listening to music and watching the city roll by. The icing on the cake came the following afternoon during the weekly shift debrief. Marisol stood at the front of the break room, going over the numbers. Despite a rocky start on Tuesday morning, Marisol announced, her eyes briefly flicking toward a very sullen-looking Harjap and Taranveer, we actually broke the daily processing record for the month. I want to single out our new hire for excellent work. He pushed the feed line to maximum capacity and held it there. Great job. A few people clapped. Oksana beamed at me. Harjap stared at his boots, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack a molar. As we filed out of the break room to start the shift, Daljit, the guy who had witnessed the bullies getting chewed out, walked up beside me and clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. Man, Daljit whispered, shaking his head in awe. They are terrified of you today. You're an absolute machine. The machine, I smiled to myself as I tied my apron. It wasn't quite as cool as my old college nickname, but given the circumstances, I would absolutely take it. If there is a lesson to be pulled from the steam and the clatter of that warehouse, it's this. Never let the cruelty of miserable people dictate your worth. When someone tries to push you down, don't waste your breath arguing with them. Use your actions. Outwork them, outsmart them, and let their own laziness be the anchor that drags them under. Silence and success are the loudest forms of retaliation. If you enjoyed this story of workplace justice, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of sweet, undeniable revenge. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had a coworker who thought they ran the place only to get exposed? Tell me your story. Until next time, keep your head up, outwork the bullies, and I'll see you in the next video.